Hello and welcome to the MSTieCast. I'm your host, Toby Mobius, here with three of my cohorts. Joshua McLeod.
Yeah!
Frederick Fritz.
Hey, pasa!
And returning, Alex Jowski.
Hello.
And because it is October, a month of monsters and scares, and since this is our last episode of the month before we go on hiatus, I personally thought it'd be appropriate if we discussed monsters, mostly in Mystery Science Theater, and see why they are effective and why, in the case of misted movies, they usually aren't at all. So, with that in mind, I thought it'd be cool for each of us to pick a different favorite monster used on MST and have a roundtable discussion on that monster, why it's effective, and why they aren't. So, with that in mind, first off, we're starting with Mr. Jowski. And what monster did you pick?
I picked Gamera.
Gamera, friend of all children.
Friend of all children.
All right, you have the floor, sir.
I love Gamera because he's damn enjoyable, hilarious. Even without the riffing, the Gamera films are great. And he is a friend to all children. You can't hate Gamera. He's not scary, he's lovable. And the Gamera films themselves are just bizarre. They're so bizarre that you just watch them and you're like, WTF is going on here?
The early ones.
Oh, even the later ones are odd. But yeah, especially the early
later
ones. So do I. I love the early ones better because they're just
Where
so
he's doing
bizarre.
the gymnastics? Where he's doing the gymnastics?
Yeah, I didn't like how they made Gamera look in the Millennium series, though. He looks more like a giant turtle and not a giant monster turtle.
I'd like to point out that Gamera was not friend to all children in Gamera versus Barugon.
No, I think that's like the only one where there's no kid on his side. Because even in the first Gamera where he's destroying Tokyo, there's that kid.
You know, Kenny.
Yes, Kenny.
We like this Kenny.
Was that the kid with the psychic link, or was that later?
No, he had a psychic link. He had
Okay.
some kind of link.
Well, Kenny
Turtle.
was just obsessed with turtles.
He had some kind of link with Gamera. I think that's established.
Well, they played like Pokemon Wi-Fi together. Okay.
Actually, this is sort of the precursor to Pokemon when you think about it, but that's a different story.
Yeah, because you didn't have kids in Gamera versus Baragon, but all the rest of those earlier ones, there was always a kid protagonist. Gamera versus Gauss had that chubby kid.
Ichi.
Ichi, yes. And then all the other ones, they actually grouped kids together. They had like a pair of kids, usually an American actor too is one of them.
Or at least a Caucasian actor.
Yeah. Like in Gamera versus Giron.
Yeah, Tom and Akio.
The two that they didn't have on MST, the Gamera versus Vera's, Gamera versus Jiger, both had American casts. Well, one American kid. And then Gamera versus Zigra.
Had the Zollner sisters.
Yes.
I don't even remember the names of the kids in Gamera vs. Zigra. I just remember that they were the Zollner sisters.
And I remember they wanted Pepsi, or was it Coke?
It was Coke, or the youngest one wanted Coke.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was that the Japanese subtitle, or was that just the Sandy Frank dub?
That's actually like one of the few I haven't actually seen a Japanese subtitled one for.
And did the DVD not come with subtitles? It had to have come with subtitles. The Shout Factory DVD?
That's the only one I don't have a Shout Factory DVD for. That one I just have the MST DVD for.
Gamera. Well, and then there's the 8th one. That was the big disaster. Do we all know that one?
Gamera Super Monster.
Gamera Super Monster.
He fights everybody.
Yeah, what was the big deal? It was supposedly a disaster. What went wrong with it? Because I haven't seen it.
I don't know that what went wrong with it.
There was some sort of debacle with it, but and there was going to be.
I remember the trilogy more than that later trilogy from just before 2000 is the ones I know better than the early ones.
The High Side trilogy with the Guardian of the Universe, Attack of the Legion, Awakening of the Iris.
Yeah, that's my favorite batch right there. He's got a great visual style too. He did this movie right after Gamera 3 called Crossfire, which while unfortunately it doesn't quite live up to the premise, it's supposed to be like a Japanese fire starter. It's still a really like nice looking movie. He really has a good visual flair.
It does, and I like that he's fighting hordes of Gauss in the third one.
Yeah. Or no, that's the first one. He's fighting a creature called Iris in the third one.
Okay.
And somebody told me, now I mean I don't know if this is right, or somebody told me technically that wasn't Gauss. I always thought it was Gauss. Josh, do you know about this one?
During the third one or during Gamma versus Gurion?
The first one.
The first of the New Millennia trilogy. I wouldn't know. I don't know anything about. I don't know as much about those as I know about.
I don't think they're called. I don't think this is the New Millennium trilogy. This one's from '95.
Or the pre-Millennium trilogy. The Heisei
I was
era.
going to say they're called. These are called the Guardian of the Universe trilogies. How they're traditionally.
You called them something similar earlier, and so that's what I was going off of.
I always pronounce it Gamma versus Gurion because that's how they pronounce it in the Sandy Frank version. Because in the MST they make a joke about it rhyming with urine.
Okay.
But in Gurion he fights Gauss. He fights Super Gauss, isn't it?
No, Gurion fights Gauss.
Gurion fights Gauss. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and he cuts him up, real brutal.
Yeah, that's probably the most brutal anything ever got in a Gamera movie, especially the later ones. Go ahead, Alex.
Well, there's Gamma versus Jiger, which is just that one is so bizarre.
I've heard that.
I mean, there's a scene in there where Gamera has some parasite in him, and they do X-rays, and this doctor is trying to explain what parasites are by showing footage of people cutting open elephants and taking out worms.
Ugh.
Ew.
And kids have to like climb into Gamera to fight monsters inside of his body.
Ew.
What's this one called?
Gamera versus Jiger.
Well, I want to find this one.
This is one of the two that Sandy Frank didn't dub or bring over during the 80s.
Yeah, Gamera versus Jiger is just bizarre, and even if Sandy Frank didn't do a version of Gamera versus Virus, half of that movie is stock footage from the previous films. So I could see why that one would not have been on MST, because they already ripped half the movie.
Yeah, because Sandy Frank didn't. Well, and Sandy Frank didn't. If Sandy Frank didn't bring it over, then they weren't going to do it because there's some weird rightsy thingies. He only did the 5 that were featured. And a bunch of other crap from other stuff.
But actually, the one print of Gamera vs. Virus called Destroy All Planets is in public domain.
Yeah, that was the AIP.
The AIP one, yeah.
And do you know why they have the American kid in every movie after the 4th or 3rd one?
I know how they got them, but not why.
Really, tell me how they got them after I tell you this, but why they got them was because Sam Arkoff, who owned AIP, said, we'll buy every movie that you make and distribute it to television under one condition, which was put some white people in these movies. Because then if you put some Caucasians in the movies, then we can sell them to television easier. And if you'll note, the original Gamera, The Invincible, they added scenes with Albert Decker, I think, was the actor. They added a bunch of scenes in the American cut, and so that was one way to sell it easier to the American audience was to have white people in it. Yeah, we lived in a great time back then, didn't we? But how did
they got the kids from military bases in Japan. They were kids of American military personnel.
That would explain why most of them never went on to do anything subsequently.
Yeah, and in fact, the military scenes in Gamera, that's actually shot at a military base with military people. That's why they're terrible actors.
Yeah, the tubby guy that looks like a Curly. Yeah, he's great.
He actually shows up in the background of Gamera versus Baragon.
Really?
The same actor.
I don't remember that.
When they're all in the subway, you can see him in the background.
You know why they had white people in the first one?
To try and create a Gamera's threatening the world kind of feel? I don't know.
Because they had an American and a Ruski in that movie that both spoke Japanese, but for some reason we cut away to the Americans at the military base, who are speaking in English.
And actually, the kids in the later Gamera films, like the one that was in Gamera vs. Virus, as well as the one in Gamera vs. Giran, they actually spoke some Japanese. They were almost fluent in it because they grew up in Japan on military bases.
Well, I would guess that since Godzilla was the predecessor to all this, and the American version had come out with Raymond Burr, there was probably some understanding that even from the Japanese perspective, hey, we can market these to Americans. So that might have had some influence no matter what.
Yeah,
right from the go.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up later when I talked about Godzilla.
Well, we're just talking about the fact that they put Americans in there. I'm just saying that might have had an early influence on why they'd even consider it.
And they did a few things like that with subsequent Godzilla movies. I'm trying to remember the one. I think it was versus Monster Zero.
Yeah, Monster Zero had, what's his face? Adams.
Yeah.
Nick Adams.
Yeah.
Who was also in War of the Gargantuas. Not War of the Gargantuas.
Garganauts?
The War of the Gargantuas is the sequel to the one that had Frankenstein versus the World. War of the Gargantuas had Russ Tamblyn.
Well, now that we're talking about Godzilla, I might as well go. Yes, the monster I picked was the king of the monsters, who sometimes is a friend to children and sometimes not.
But they're always underfoot.
Godzilla wasn't as frequent on the Mystery Science Theater as Gamera was, but he still got a couple of good outings. Sea Monster and Megalon, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Megalon is classic.
Yes.
Megalon is the epitome of probably the worst Godzilla movie ever, I think.
Not the worst. There's worse Godzilla movies.
It's either that or Godzilla's Revenge.
Yeah, I would say Revenge.
I would probably go with Revenge, then maybe, because Megalon's fun, man. I mean, Megalon, as bad as it is, that's fun movie.
Jet Jaga, Jet Jaga.
And Rex Dart, Eskimo Spy.
And I still don't get Rex. I've complained about this episode a number of times. I still don't get Rex Dart, Eskimo Spy.
And then they reference it in other episodes too.
Yeah, it really had no. And the other one that really angered me is Orville Popcorn, but that's just me. The popcorn sketch. No one remembers it. Gee, I wonder why.
I remember it.
Yeah. It really didn't go anywhere. It's like 8 minutes. It really is like 8 minutes long, but that's beside the point.
I don't have as strong a love for Godzilla as Alex does with Gamera. I am a Godzilla fan. Since I was a kid, we had VHS tapes of a couple of them. I can't remember which ones. I was very young. And I knew enough about Godzilla to when I saw the American Godzilla on TV, I was disappointed.
You mean the 98 Matthew Broderick?
Yes, the one with a lot of fish. That one.
That terrible movie.
And as far as Godzilla is concerned, I'm not sure how much I can really say about Godzilla. He's the icon. Out of all of the monsters featured that are going to be featured on this episode, he is, the biggest, without a doubt.
Well, I think there's a lot you can talk about with Godzilla, because it's really intriguing how a monster that was born out of pretty much a complete social event,
Mm-hmm.
out of disaster, the bombing of Japan,
Right.
That this creature became so popular in America, and there's a really kind of almost sick irony to that. In a way, but I mean, Godzilla has gone through some very bizarre changes throughout his history, from starting as the villain, going on to become a hero, going on to becoming a child's hero.
Well, they did that because after Godzilla vs. Mothra is when they realized that all the kids love Godzilla, so we should make him the good guy, has a good influence.
Yeah. And then, of course, they started doing the Godzilla vs. Smog monster to get the social awareness issues in there. And actually, almost all the Godzilla films afterwards have still had some form of that. I mean, years later, you have Godzilla vs. Biollante, which is very similar in many respects.
So what's the social message in Megalon?
In which one?
Megalon.
That our bombing is hurting the Atlanteans.
There you go.
How about the Atlanteans?
It's Atlanteus prejudice. No, but it's just an interesting thing. I mean, even his name in America is actually because someone doesn't pay attention. His name is Gojira. Gojira. But when the Japanese are saying it in the movies, they're going Gojira, Gojira, and somebody heard Godzilla. And
no, it was actually
that's what I was
misrepresentation of the kana for it. They misinterpreted the GI as a DZI.
You're gonna have to expand on that one, Alex. I don't know what you're talking about.
It is likely that the kana representing the second syllable was misinterpreted as DZI in the Hepburn romanization system.
Okay, for those that kana, he's referring to the written Japanese words.
Godzilla's name would have been rendered as Gojira, whereas in the Kunrei romanization system, it would have been rendered as Godzilla, with a Z instead of a J.
Makes sense.
I've always thought it's funny, there does seem to be two camps of people, those who prefer heroic Godzilla and those who prefer the more, not villainous, he's not villainous, but definitely...
Force of nature.
Not a friend.
Force of nature, there we go. Force of nature, not a friend of mankind. Watching out for basically himself, and when he fights monsters in the later movies, it's all because those monsters have impeded on his territory.
But you bring up Godzilla versus the Smog Monster with its environmentalism.
Yeah.
And the reason that one is so odd, the director just went with his own vision for it. And Toho regretted it. They hated it. The president of Toho told the guy, you're never working for Toho again. You'll never make a movie in Japan. And he didn't.
Yeah,
I have to admit, I don't like that one either. I really don't.
Toho ended his career after that. They hated that movie so much.
When Toho puts you on the blacklist, you may as well kill yourself. Your career's over.
Well, I'll tell you what, for as bad as we like to pick on our system, I mean, if you really look at the way the Japanese do their TV series and movies, they're even worse than us. I mean, they do reboots constantly. They reboot entire TV shows while they're still popular. They do that with anime constantly. I mean, so yeah, it's a vicious cycle over there. But it's a long, illustrious history. I mean, there's so much about Godzilla that's really amazing, right down to the soundtracks.
I love the music.
I do too. The most famous, of course, being the work done by Akira Ifukube, who gave us the Godzilla March. But there was even some great stuff like when Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla hit, which was not done by him, but has that great kind of jazzy sound to it. But I think those are even the better soundtracks of the whole monster series.
Even the Jaguar song is catchy.
Yeah. Now that you mention it,
gets stuck in your head like the Gamera song does. It has the same kind of happiness to it.
Now, is it Jet Jaguar or is it Jet Jaguar? Is that a mistranslation?
I think it's a mistranslation. Okay. That way we would pronounce it Jaguar. Okay. Over there they pronounce it Jagar.
Jet Jaguar.
But he's right. And then, of course, probably one of my favorites was always the twins in the Mothra. The Mothra. I always loved that.
Yeah.
And in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, which I just looked it up, it was done by... this is a shame. I have this CD. I'm actually ashamed of myself for not knowing this right off the bat, because I tracked this soundtrack down. It took me years to find it. But it was Masaru Sato, and there's a song where they try to wake up King Caesar. That's a fun one, too.
Terror of Mechagodzilla.
Oh, was that in Terror of Mechagodzilla?
I'm trying to think. One of them had King Caesar, one of them had, Megasaurus.
Because, it's quite possible that they... In my head, these are actually backwards, so... I always thought it was Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, but that could be very wrong.
Godzilla Terror and Godzilla. No, you're right. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is the one with King Caesar.
Okay, good. Because I never cared for Terror of Mechagodzilla as much. That's why I was pretty sure it was that one. I don't like Terror of Mechagodzilla till the end, till the big fight. But I always thought Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla was a little better.
What do you think of Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2?
Oh, where they brought... Well, it's not the same, obviously, because now it's just Mechagodzilla built by humans.
Right.
From the specs of the original, apparently, but still...
Well, there was the 2002 Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, where they had basically built a shell around the skeleton of Godzilla from the original movie.
Right. It's okay. I think of all the new ones, I preferred one of the earliest, which was Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. Which
That is a brilliant
one's awesome.
one.
Yeah, and you got a mecha, one of the heads on King Ghidorah ends up mechanized. And
Yeah, that's the one where they use the time travel to basically
With the evil
retcon
Americans.
Godzilla. Yeah, they retcon Godzilla out of existence so they could take over the world. And
that's how we get a new, bigger Godzilla, because he's hit by an even larger dose of radiation.
Well, the good news is Godzilla's back. The bad news is Godzilla's back.
Yeah, I think that's the best of the group. I mean, there were some good ones after, but none of them quite topped that one. The energy, the story,
the silliness.
I don't know. I liked it. I mean, you gotta accept silliness in all these movies.
Oh, I love the silliness. Especially when the effects don't work.
Yeah. Godzilla Final Wars, though, where he fights every Godzilla monster ever, including the American Godzilla.
Just like you ain't nothing. Just go away. And there's that really awesome badass American general guy. I love that one.
But the new Terror Mechagodzillas are actually, or not Terror, but the new Mechagodzilla movies, they're not bad. I mean, as a movie, I just don't. Mechagodzilla is not quite the same for me, though. I remember I was very lucky. I saw Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla in the theater as a kid. This small town theater just had a copy. And when Godzilla is attacking this, now remember, I thought of Godzilla as a hero at this time. I was a kid. And so Godzilla's coming into the city and he's destroying everybody and killing, and they're like, wow, what's going on with Godzilla? He's freaking out. And then all of a sudden, Godzilla shows up. And now there's two Godzillas, and I mean, I was euphoric as a kid. I'm like, there's two Godzillas, and then, a piece of Godzilla gets knocked off, and there's something shiny underneath, and I don't know. As a kid, there was just something very, very cool about that. And that's the one thing the Mechagodzillas, the new ones, didn't recapture. Whereas, like, say, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, that one gets it all right. I think that one's really cool. It's very special. King Ghidorah he is a bigger threat when he comes back with the mechanized head. But with the new Mechagodzillas, it was just, oh, look, we're bringing back the name Mechagodzilla. I mean, that's really about it.
Well, my daughter's really into the Godzilla films. And it's adorable watching her watch them because she gets really into them. Like, if Godzilla's getting hurt, she's about to cry.
Aww.
But they were made for kids, those later ones from the early era. And they were successful. I mean, we think they're goofy, but kids loved them. They reached their target audience well enough.
I think that's a good end cap to the Godzilla portion of our discussion. Josh, I believe it is your turn. What monster did you pick?
I chose the famous creature from Venus in It Conquered the World.
Ah, good choice.
Which, if you remember do we all remember that monster?
Yes.
It had that thick base, and it had kind of had that curved, pointed upward. It was sort of like a really tiny mountain.
Yeah.
Is the best way I can describe it, with like an evil face at the bottom. It looked evil. You got to give it credit. The face looked evil. I mean, it looked. There's a famous story about the making of that thing. Does anybody know the story?
No.
That they were making the movie. They hadn't built the monster yet. They were making the movie, and Beverly Garland wanted to know, when are we going to see the monster? And Roger's like, well, we're building it. And they finally Corman finally gets the monster done, and they bring it out, and she's like, this is the monster, and it's like 3 feet tall. That cone is non-existent. It's literally just like 3 feet tall, like with a flat head. And Despair was like, that's the monster? And she kicked it over. She gave it a kick, and it fell over. And Roger Corman said, well, because they were from Venus, I felt they would be low to the ground. To which Beverly Garland replied, not that low.
Oh, Corman.
And so they sort of lazily slapped on the cone you see at the top.
But yeah, you can kind of see that it wasn't really supposed to go there.
Well, once again, that's, we're overthinking it,
It kind of looks like a high schooler's evil science class volcano.
It does. It looks like
See, it's got some tree branches on the top there, and it just like came to life, and it wants to destroy its master.
And it's got Tyrannosaurus Rex arms, which really are just for decoration. They don't really do anything. Like even if they were operable, they probably wouldn't be able to pick anything up. Which, by the way, another great title that was totally full of it, because it did not conquer the world.
It didn't even conquer a city.
No.
That thing couldn't conquer a sandwich.
It just hung out in the woods and killed stuff.
Yeah, and Beverly Garland.
But among produce, it is quite feared.
Yeah. Well, did I say pickle from Venus? It's often referred to as the pickle from Venus. But you can buy the pickle from Venus doll at some... Or maybe you can. Maybe you could buy it at one point. Now you can't because Susan Hart Nicholson owns the rights, and her stuff, she's not easy to clear. Are we familiar with that story?
Nope.
She's James Nicholson's widow, and if you've ever wondered why I Was a Teenage Werewolf has never been on DVD, you can thank her for that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh.
She owns the rights to that. She owns the rights to It Conquered the World. She owns Amazing Colossal Man. What's the other one she owns? She owns like 3. Invasion of the Saucer Men.
Guessing she's not a huge Mystery Science Theater fan.
I don't even think she knows it exists.
Hmm.
She's never given it to anybody, and the uncut version. I mean, she's never doled it out to anybody for any reason.
Interesting.
But yeah, It Conquered the World.
That movie had a cast, though. You had Peter Graves and Lee Van Cleef.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, none of them were actually obviously famous yet, and it's just so interesting to think of that now.
Corman regular Dick Miller.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, I give Roger Corman absolutely zero credit for those people becoming famous. I think they would have been famous without him. I know, Fred, you secretly love Corman.
No, I secretly, not secretly even, there's several projects and things that Corman did and was associated with that I love. He had a period around the 1970s, which I think is the most alive and interesting, late 60s through the 70s, which I think is the most alive period in Corman's tenure. His early stuff is pretty much the kind of schlock of that period. You know what I mean? There's nothing that stands out on its own. The story about what he was doing at that time, like if you read his book, I think it's called How I Made 1,000 Movies, Never Lost a Dime. His career is fascinating, and how he got started and what started him, and how he just didn't fit into the Hollywood system. Like he tried and he just didn't. And then he went off and started his own and almost became the things that bothered him the most in some respects. But in the 70s, you just got this really alive period where all these filmmakers just came together, and he was like, hey, you make it for this amount, and you can make whatever you want just as long as it's about the topic I give you. Because that's what sold the movies. I mean, in Rock and Roll High School, which is one of my all-time favorites, which is just a great, fun movie, was supposed to be Disco High. That's what it was going to be, Disco High. And he gave it to Alan Arkish, And Alan Arkish was like, man, Roger, nobody listens to disco anymore, man. And Roger goes, well, what are they into? And he goes, rock and roll, man. So Roger just said, then make it about rock and roll. And to me, that's kind of interesting. That think about that happening in a Hollywood system. It wouldn't be that easy. You wouldn't go to the money man and just change it that easily. So that's what I like about Corman in that period, is there was all these films that came out, Boxcar Bertha, and the Grand Theft Auto that Ron Howard directed. I mean, you got Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, Ron Howard, Joe Dante. All these guys came out of that period, and that was a very exciting time with Corman's productions. So that's what I love specifically about Corman. It's not like I love everything. A lot of what Corman does today, I wouldn't pay a nickel to see, unfortunately. I just don't like it. But I do love that period. That's my favorite period. And I like his movie Frankenstein Unbound that he directed.
Well, setting that aside, a lot of the schlock he made in the 50s, I think he still holds in high regard, which is unfortunate because he's one of the big Mystery Science Theater, what do you call it, opponents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He certainly does not like Mystery Science, and he's made that clear more than once. Or the Wasp Woman fiasco.
I think in his case, though, it's clearly financial. I mean,
I don't buy
there's
that.
no other angle. I believe that Corman's always made it very clear he's about making $1 off the movie.
Yeah. He's all about the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if that were the case, how come we don't have what are the two he owns? Deathstalker and the Warriors from Hell, and Being from Another Planet out on DVD.
I can promise you, there's a financial reason behind it.
Well, he doesn't even own those. He didn't even make those stupid movies. He already sold them to Shout Factory. Shout Factory's releasing them, but they can't release the Mystery Science version. So,
all right, then I don't understand the question. In all honesty,
he's allowed them to release the unedited versions through Shout Factory, but he has not allowed them to release the Mystery Science versions on DVD. Does that make sense?
Well, I get it now. Like I said, though, I'm betting that there's a financial angle to it. I mean, obviously, when it comes to rights holding, as we all know, I think anybody who studied anything about movies and the way rights are held, it becomes something of a nightmare the more people that become involved. And, when properties change studios, and that's how studio wars begin, why we get sequels that aren't really sequels because they're made by alternate companies, and the rights to screenplays divide. That's why we've got like the James Bond Thunderball and then the offshoot Never Say Never Again, which is not an official James Bond movie, even though it was made as a James Bond film. It's crazy. It's just absolutely bizarre. And where Corman is involved, generally speaking, everything I've ever seen, and Alex will back me up, I know that he's very honest about that he's very financially motivated when it comes to all of his films.
Well, I mean, I think there's more to it than just finances, despite what
Well, we don't know. I can't say. Well, since we don't know, we can speculate all day long. He hates the pictures. He hated somebody involved. He's doing it out of spite. I don't know. Who knows? I'm just saying that generally, I'm just going by the Occam's razor theory here.
Who knows?
What do we know about Corman?
The Shadow knows.
He doesn't own the rights to that one.
No, I just needed to say something. I haven't talked in a while.
I don't like Corman if I haven't made that clear. Have I not made that clear?
No, it's abundantly clear here.
Yeah. See.
Josh, I think that should be your catchphrase. I don't like blank. Have I made it clear that I don't like blank? Batten, I don't like foreign music.
Yeah.
Let's not go there. Which, by the way, I had to tell my class today, hey, so my friends think I'm a racist.
Why'd you tell your class that?
Because it was part of the tortilla thing that I showed them. And it was like, I needed a word, and to make the situations worse, I then asked my friends, I need a word for taco that doesn't sound Mexican.
Do two guys with shaven heads come up to you after class by any chance?
No.
Okay. Just keep an eye open for two white guys with shaven heads. That's all I'm saying.
We have
Right,
some
you want a word
literature
for
we'd like you to
taco?
read.
Crunchy beef wrap.
I should have called it. Well, it had to sound 50s-ish, and Fred, you came up with corn wedge, which was perfect.
Corn wedge and a
Corn-
hamburger sandwich.
Sandwich was more of a 40s thing.
I would imagine they would say sandwich in the 50s.
Not in reference to hamburger. No, they would say hamburger or burger. That was around the era where the drive-in was coming in, and people didn't say it. It wasn't like the 40s where if you wanted a hamburger, you had to go to like a sit-down restaurant.
Corn
This is
wedge
what
and
they
an egg.
refer to in our business people as off topic.
Woo! More things I have to edit. Well, that was
So yeah, I don't like Roger Corman. What do you got, Fred?
About Roger Corman?
No,
No.
for monsters.
Monster.
Oh, my pick, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, my pick was I had to go since we were obviously very MST focused. There are other monsters I would have probably gone with if it was non, but for MST, I had to go with what is commonly referred to as the hot dog mouth monsters from Horror of Party Beach. That movie is to use what Alex said earlier. That movie is actually a blast with or without the riffing. That's a film that I used to watch. I worked at this little video store, and we would put it in all the time, and we would just play it and make fun of it the whole time. And then, of course, to see it on MST later was a gas, you know. And the things being created. Does anyone love pickles more than I? You know, just some great riffing in that movie. That's another one I would put up high on my list of MST films I'd recommend. But it's just such a goofy, silly, just a ridiculous looking. I mean, everything about that monster is bizarre in its creation. The way you can see the human body who's in it is hunched over, yet the head's jut straight up.
Sodium.
Sodium.
Sodium. I'm not going to sing it.
But
Actually, Horror Party. Go ahead, Fred.
I love the movie, you know, and boy, this is kind of bad. Maybe now that I think about it, I don't know. Maybe it's the love of the cornball nature of the movie more than even well, not more than the monsters, but with the monsters. But that thing is so silly. I mean, I know the Corman era stuff we were just talking about had some very silly monsters, but man, I can't think of too many that compete with this one. That's just in that category of what were you thinking? It looks like they stopped and started 3 different designs and just sort of rammed them all together.
Well, Horror Party Beach is one of the few Mystery Science Theater movies that I don't know anything about. So, because I don't know who made. I don't even remember the studio that made it. Does anyone
Well,
know?
Del Tenney directed it.
Del Tenney, and he was.
Tenny.
Direct Corpse of the Living Corpse, or no, I'm sorry, Curse of the Corpse of the Living Corpse. There you go.
Which was
Curse
double billed.
of the Living Corpse.
Which was double billed with Horror Party Beach, if I remember correctly.
I
Yes.
think there's a DVD out actually of it.
He also did. He was also. I Eat Your Skin.
Yes. That was like I believe his first, but I don't know that for a fact.
By the way,
Yeah,
Fred,
look it up. I'll look it
Fred,
up.
okay, Fred, you sound kind of tin canny.
Oh,
sound
here,
kind-
let me put this tin can down. There.
Stop
Better?
eating soup during the show. I told you.
Good. Yeah, but that's just a fun, goofy movie with a very fun, goofy monster. And obviously, when you're going to stick with MST only, you're kind of limited because obviously the 2 biggest are Gamera and Godzilla, no doubts. That's
And Gordo.
and the rest are going to be just basically one-offs for the most part. So I mean, there's not a whole lot going on here. I don't know who built the monsters. I would love to know who did. It's a silly, goofy, fun movie that I've liked for years. I liked it before I saw saw it on MST, and I still really enjoy it. It is probably in my top 10 of cheesy bad movies of all time that I love.
I disagree with your statement that Gamera and Godzilla are the only ones, because we also have Glenn Manning is in there as well, because he comes back twice. From The Amazing Colossal Man.
Yes. Well, you have a few Burt I. Gordon films, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was the only
I'm
sequel.
referring to reoccurring monsters specifically.
Well, he
though.
reoccurs.
You've got to limit it. Yeah, twice. He's in 2 movies. But I'm saying, as far as the overall, there's not a whole lot of choices. I wouldn't even pick him because he's a giant man. I don't know. That's not going to go cut it for me personally. I actually didn't really care for those particular Bird-Eye films.
Wow, harsh.
I always liked that he did movies about like giant people, giant monsters, and his name is an anagram of big.
Not an anagram.
Acronym.
Acronym.
Yes.
Yeah, he did. I mean, I'm not saying he did nothing fun. Obviously, I'm just saying, comparatively speaking, though, there's not a lot you can deal with on MST except for the one-offs, for the most part. And these type of movies are obviously all perfect targets. I mean, what's fun to think about with MST is all the films that could have been. And that's what a lot of fans tend to do, and that's why there's that's where there's fan films going on of MST, and that's why Riff Track still exists, and Cinematic Titanic, and so.
I'm told Gulala the Atomic Chicken was probably one of the. Or remember the Claw from the movie The Claw, that weird bird thing?
Mm-hmm.
Giant Claw.
Oh yes. The
Giant Claw was what it was called.
Yeah.
That was one where you're kind of like, why didn't they? I haven't seen the movie, but that monster's definitely up there in the kind of goofy spectrum.
Burt I. Gordon would actually, took me a second to figure, an anagram of bed groin rot.
Yeah, that about.
Did you actually come up with that, or did you put it in a machine that
I
made
put it in a machine.
Thank you.
A cool movie that Bird-Eye did years later that would have probably made a really good MST was Empire of the Ants. That's one I like.
He loved ripping off H.G. Wells. He's like, I don't have to pay this guy a dime.
Yeah, with the Food of the Gods and stuff like
Village
that.
of the Giants, yep.
Yeah, I love Village of the Giants, by the way. That is, in fact, in some ways, that's very similar to that kind of tone to horror at Party Beach. And you got the hey man and the swinging crowd.
It's sort of teenagers, and there's sort of conflict, but at the end of the movie, it's like, it's like nothing ever happened. Let's just dance.
Yeah. So maybe, but that's it. That's all I've got really for that. There's just not a lot to say, unfortunately, about the creature itself, other than if you haven't seen the movie, you've got to see it. It's really great, and I love that one for just how they defeat it and the way it attacks, and it's really funny.
I'm just gonna go down to Party Beach and hang out with the horror now.
All right, thanks very much, Fred. All right, now that we've all discussed our favorite monsters, I think it'd be important to discuss why some of them, at least, were effective and others were not. Not just out of the ones we picked, but of all the ones on Mystery Science Theater and kind of monsters in general.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hard pressed to think of a monster on Mystery Science Theater that was legitimately scary. Maybe the toy monkey from Merlin's Mystical Shop of Wonders.
Yeah.
Maybe. I really can't think of can anyone think of one that was legitimately scary or frightening?
Robert Zadar's face from Soul Taker.
That's mean. You're mean,
but
too.
accurate.
I like Robert Zadar.
I like him too.
Bloodwaters of Dr. Z. Dr. Z before he transforms. When he's walking around his... Yeah, when he's walking around his basement naked.
But isn't he in like short shorts or something?
I think he's in a pair of boxers.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. Which, by the way, something worth noting, he's never at any point in the movie referred to as Dr. Z.
And actually, the original title of that movie is Zat.
Mm-hmm. And Bloodwaters to Dr. Z is just something that some video distributor put on it.
Great name.
That would explain why. Yeah, he's just Dr. Leopold, that psycho that turned into a catfish.
Well, I can't really say. I guess I have to agree that if you're talking traditionally frightening, I'm gonna have to go with no. There's maybe a few things that have more like a moment in them that maybe is frightening. Like Laser Blast is a movie that's very silly, but there are some moments where it's a little freaky when he starts to turn. And I think that people have a natural fear of the idea of being maimed or deformed in any way. And when he starts to grow like that thing on his chest, and it's like the doctor's like, it's like a hard plate, and he like peels it off, and that's very icky and disturbing. And as the kid's changing and turning into something else, that's kind of spooky.
By that same logic, you could also go with the Incredible Melting Man.
Yeah.
Ew.
He was gross looking.
It was icky. I don't know if I'd say scary, but icky. But yes, I actually would include that in the same. If I can just say, Toby said, what makes it effective or not effective is an interesting question, because I was thinking about it, and obviously somebody might say, well, not looking realistic, which of course is that's a subjective statement. If you look at the work of Jim Henson, and let's look at the stuff like that he played straight and serious, The Dark Crystal. Nothing in that film looks remotely what we would call real. Okay, I mean, the lead characters are puppets. The creatures are obviously on either some kind of a stilt or animatronic. I feel that it has more to do with one of two factors: personality, or both factors combined, personality and the world they inhabit. And it's like any film. If you make people believe that this world exists, generally whatever inhabits that world follows suit. And those two factors together seem to create the world we accept. Maybe that's why, like, say, Godzilla exists. It's a world that has its own fears, and Godzilla was created out of atomic nuclear energy and destruction. And then this monster rises up. He's just a giant lizard. That's all, at the end of the day, he's just a giant lizard, and because he's bigger, he destroys everything in his path. And again, you have a world that we can believe in, it's ours in that case, and a creature that's pretty easily identifiable with what he represents. So I would say that's what defines at least what works, and perhaps what doesn't is whatever they don't sell us on.
Very well put. Anyone else have any other thoughts regarding that?
No, I think that's very well stated.
Josh?
I have Das Nothing.
I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head there.
Well, here's a thought. We like these old movies, no matter how bad they are, we're still talking about them, we're still enjoying them, not always with riffing, not just the ones we've mentioned. I mean, there are so many of these crazy films that people love and talk about and discuss, and you'll note that I'm not a CG hater like so many people are. I hate misused CG, is what I hate. When they use CG blood when there's no need for it. I mean, I just saw Expendables 2, and it was so bad, I was weeping. They were just throwing in all this CG blood just to get the R rating.
Yeah.
And
Called corn syrup, people.
It was really awful. And the same thing, my same mentality applies to the way they use it in monster movies now, is that they're not memorable. I mean, they're not. You might say, like, I know Alex loves that film, Two-Headed Shark Attack. Is that what it's called, Alex?
Yes.
But I don't think you can really call the monster itself necessarily memorable. I think that part of our love is just seeing these creations build. And there's maybe a little bit of admiration, even for the cheesy, cornball, silly ones. Because, hey, try to build one yourself, And I wonder what it would look like and how functional it would be.
By the way, get in one of those suits Those are always. If you've ever been in one of those suits,
Yeah, actually, I have.
you have. They're like 190,000 degrees inside. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, let's put it this way. There were laws passed to actually allow the people inside of them that they had to be pulled out after a certain amount of time. They have to. They got to get breaks. Like, I think it was no longer than 35 to 40 minutes, I think, because it's bad enough just in the suit, but when you're under lights, it's nightmarish. I mean, it's positively nightmarish. And you do lose weight. I mean, you can lose 10 pounds in one day in one of those suits. No joke. I mean, it's all like water weight and such, but you do. You're like, I weighed myself just to see, and I was like 10 pounds lighter.
I need to get me a job in one of those things.
Yeah, me too.
Well, like I said, it's mostly water. I mean, you're sweating, and it mixes in with the latex or foam rubber or whatever this particular one was built out of, and the smell is hideous. In fact, a friend of mine did a Star Wars parody and just put in he dressed like Darth Maul, and he put on a Darth Maul cap, just a cap. That's it, right? The rest was makeup. There was no other latex involved. So he just had the cap with the horns on top, and you just seal the cap with latex to blend it to the skin, and then put the makeup over, the black and red. Well, at the end of the day, we shot for each day. Well, we didn't have as much time, so we only shot for about 4 hours, with an hour, of course, half hour getting there, half hour getting back. And so it would vary between 5 to 6 hours total he'd be in that cap. And by the time he'd get back and peel it off, the sweat underneath just this cap would pour out, and it was this discolored goo, this grotesque, rank, smelly goo. And my point to that is that, now imagine being inside something like that. And that's what it's like. It's just the most foul, unpleasant smell when you come out of that thing. I mean, nobody wants to be around you. And you don't want to be around you. And there has been cases of actors or creature creators passing out in those things more than once. It's happened a lot. And that's not even including toxicity.
Yeah. Well, that's a note to end that discussion on.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I wasn't trying to make it negative. It was asked about anybody being in them.
Yeah.
It's a valid point, because there's often the joke about, oh, you can tell there's a person in that. That's always bothered me a little bit, because if it's animatronic, there's a person operating the eyes and the mouth. If it's a puppet, there's a hand in it. It's a stupid statement. I don't care if there's a person in it or not. I care about what's behind it. I mean, when we were talking about Godzilla earlier, the early Godzilla, the hamburger helper one, versus the later, much more beefy, the one that was rebooted in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. It's still a person in that suit, but it's a much better suit, and they used animatronic head, and it looks great, but it's still a person. And that to me is like a non-point. But we often do forget that that's a person in there, and I mean, they suffer, man. And more than one actor has suffered a toxic shock from the latex, because they didn't even know until they got inside of it that they were allergic. So it's a valid point, and it's kind of interesting that we don't think more about what those people go through. Maybe Kenny Baker's R2-D2 would be the closest we get. But Bob, oh no, I forgot his name. He was the gentleman inside. He was the gentleman inside the robot in Lost in Space, and even though he wasn't the voice, stuff like that.
Bob Burns.
Might have been Hastings, but I can't remember. I honestly can't.
I think of the guys that said the Cyberman costumes on Doctor Who.
Yeah, well, Doctor Who, there's a great example of just a lot of monsters, and especially of the rubber or Reynolds wrap variety.
Or bubble wrap.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys ever see the Doctor Who parody special where they had all those actors playing the different doctors from different eras, and they have a Christmas, I think it was Thanksgiving get together, like all the doctors are together for Thanksgiving, and one's chasing another one with Reynolds Wrap. He's like, man, that's not fair. You know all of his monsters were made from that, you know.
I think that about sums up our discussion. Anyone have any final thoughts?
No, I don't.
Fred, Josh?
I'm thinking. I apologize. Go ahead, you guys. I'm just trying to think of what we could surmise everything with. I mean, obviously Yeah, there you go. We're obviously touching. You know, there's a good point. In just a couple weeks' time, we're gonna have kids running around dressed up. You know, in fact, they're gonna look better than some of the Hollywood's creations these days.
Yeah.
Because they'll be real and not CG'd.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's a valid point. The cosplays that you see pictures of today, I'm telling you, the cosplays are better than what Hollywood is producing in general terms. The superhero characters look like the superheroes in the comics when Hollywood has to put, everybody into black latex rubber. And they create full monsters now. I mean, kids are doing this stuff. So, you know, they say it's died, but you know what? It hasn't died. It's just transferred forms. And that's, to me, that's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think that this was a really great discussion, guys. I think we all had some pretty good points. Except me, because I didn't really say much. But I don't tend to say much. Anyone have any final thoughts?
That Gamera is still awesome?
Yes.
I believe the correct term would be Gamera is really neat.
He
Gamera
is
is
filled
full
with
of
turtle
meat.
meat.
We've been eating Gamera.
Which, by the way, don't sing that song when you go to a Gamera movie. They'll get really pissy. That's my final thought. Fred?
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, a little bit of update on the hiatus. The upcoming MSTieCast hiatus will be until November 24th. We will have a new episode up on that date. And until then, the site it'll still be up, but it will be changing quite often, very rapidly. And if you haven't noticed, you can now find us at MSTieCast.com instead of on the Tumblr. You will be redirected to the Tumblr, and if you type in the Tumblr address, you will be redirected to MSTieCast.com. So from now on, MSTieCast.com. We've also changed our logo, the background, and if you like it, let us know. We appreciate hearing that kind of stuff. And we got some more really cool stuff coming after the hiatus, so please stick around and watch this space. Well, this has been the MSTieCast. I'm Tubby Mobius.
I'm not talking.
And I'm Frederick Fritz.
I'm Alex Jowski.
And this has been the MSTieCast. Thank you very much. Play us out, boys.